Today's session is Acing the Alumni Interview. My name is Victor, and I attended Chicago, and I'll be your moderator for this session today. It's an absolute pleasure to see every single one of you right here. Today's topic is Acing the Alumni Interview, and we'll hope to bring you through, well, some of the intricacies of alumni interviews. So for those of you who maybe aren't really familiar with the concept of like alumni right there, just a show of hands, how many of you know what the word alumni means? Okay, majority of you right there. Okay, cool, great. So now, alumni are basically just people who graduated from the universities that you want to attend. So then an alumni interview is just a conversation with the people who are going to be in charge of your fate for the university. And for today's session, we have two incredible speakers right here, Mr. Lee Wei Lun from Yale University and Nick Khaw. A bit of an interesting concept right here because we have somebody who was successful in this last application round. And that could very well be you right here. So congratulations once again to every single one of you for being here. And of course, then we have also a Harvard interviewer at this stage right here. Now, alumni interviews, they tend to be different across different universities. Harvard has a process, Yale has a process, and so on and so forth right there. But maybe, could we get you guys to maybe introduce yourselves, Wei Lun and Nick, and maybe share one fun fact about yourselves.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Wei Lun. So I did my IGs in Kuala Lumpur, and then I did A-levels in Sunway College. So I'm planning to major in a joint major. It's called Computer Science and Economics. So it's not really a double major, it's kind of like the course load of one major. And yeah, a fun fact about me is that I watched all 7 movies of Harry Potter 7 times. So I can't remember when it was, but I think it was like throughout 1 week, like every week. I mean, sorry, every day of the week I watched like all 7 when I was very young. So too much of a fan. Right. Wow.
Hi everybody. Thank you to USApps for having me here. So my name is Nick, and I'm studying as if it's a bit embarrassing because Victor is class of 2018?
2017?
28, and my one has a 0 in front of it. and also, you know, they told us to wear university merchandise today. I had to wear my grad school one because my undergrad one doesn't fit anymore because I graduated. Look, I've been interviewing since I graduated, so maybe from 2010 up until today. For Harvard College, we interview maybe 5 or 6 people every year. And maybe just to start, we don't actually control your fate. So we write a report that goes to the admissions office, and the admissions office takes that as one part of the application as a whole. Sorry if I'm starting a bit early on this, but I think, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not that end all be all. We want to do our best for you. So when we meet people who apply to Harvard and then they come for the interview. Actually, I do this on a panel with usually one other person, sometimes 2, one Nadia. And when we meet, usually what we're really trying to do is help us make the best, write the best report that we can write, because we want to, you know, do our best for everybody, right? And so the admissions is not, I mean, we're not an all be all. They have other parts as well. And to be honest, at least for Harvard, and I don't want to generalize for everybody else, the only thing that Nadia and I know about each applicant that comes in is your name and your contact. We know nothing else about you, and we have a policy that we will not Google you, so that when we meet you, it's the first time, and so it's a blank sheet lah. The only thing, your name and your email only, because we will contact you. But other than that, you know, therefore we want to have this blank sheet so that we can try our best to help you.
Amazing, thank you for that. So in this session, we'll talk a little bit about what, why, and who is involved in an alumni interview. I think that Nick talked a little bit about the Harvard process. We'll also talk a little bit about navigating the alumni interview and maybe a couple of like tips. Also for you guys, again, we have a successful applicant here and also a interviewer, so definitely make sure to ask them questions at a later point during the Q&A session as well. So I'm going to do a really quick run through of essentially the what, why, and who before we go into the more spicy experience sharing session right there. So what are alumni interviews? And by the way, you guys can like stop me like at any point, like, you know, if my understanding is incorrect right there. Alumni interviews, again, conversation with somebody who graduated from your university of choice. They help you make an impression personal or otherwise, on people who are actually in Malaysia and who graduated from the universities that you wish to attend. And who are conducting these interviews? Volunteers, like Nick, of course, and later Wei Lun, of course, perhaps, not sure. We'll see. You might be seeing him as an interviewer at some later point. But yeah, so interviewers who are really interested in meeting the best people really to fit their respective schools, how they're conducted, and so on and so forth right there. We'll talk a little more about that
Sorry, Victor,
in
can
conversation.
I correct you a little bit?
Sure.
So when Nadia and I interview, we're not looking for fit, because the point of why we want to have, why the student body is to have as diverse as possible. So fit for us doesn't really matter. We're actually just we're treating each person as the individual applicant, and sure, whether or not you'll be a contributing member of society, of the community you'll be in, but it's not like we're looking for a particular type of person or a particular group of folks or whatever it is. So when you go in, you have to represent your application as best as possible and represent you as best as possible, because again, to the question of what are alumni interviews and why they're important, right? So if you recall, Nadia and I do not have anything other than your name and contact information, but the admissions office does. They have your transcripts, they have your grades, they have your extracurricular activities, which we just went through, they have your essays. So the interview is something that just needs to complement everything that you already submitted without actually repeating too much about the stuff that's already in there. If you send in your CV, there's no need to really repeat your CV again, but to talk maybe a little bit about your experiences going through it, some of the things you've learned and stuff like that really couldn't fit on a CV or an essay, right? Maybe it fit on your essay, but so just keep that in mind now. It's meant to complement everything else, and it shouldn't be a regurgitation of your CV.
Perfect, thank you for that. All right, so then now let's go into a little bit more experience sharing along the way. So then for you, perhaps Wei Lun, it's quite a recent experience for you to have gone through your alumni interview. I think that you mentioned a bit over WhatsApp as well, and then Nick, you were at some point also an applicant. So maybe could I ask you guys to share a little bit about your respective interview experiences?
Alright, so I'll just roughly run through what happened for me. So for those of you guys who don't know, basically after you submit your application in early January or somewhere there, usually like the interviewer will reach out to you either through WhatsApp or through email or something like that around February to March. So yeah, so I received mine in February. Then I met with a Yale alum, so he did like econs masters at Yale. We met in McDonald's. So, and then it was quite noisy, so like it was a little bit chaotic, but it started off with, it's way more chill than I initially thought it would, because it started off with me giving him, helping him with tech support. So he got his like iPad, I just bought an iPad, like can you help, like, so yeah, so I was just helping him. But yeah, that's that. So then we began the interview. So he began really by asking me to talk about my interests, my ambitions, and so in order to like show that I truly have interest in what I talked about was tech ethics, right? Tech ethics and the intersection of technology and sociology, politics, and all that. So I brought up like I'm sure you guys know, right? The big tech congressional hearings, like the one where they're grilling Mark Zuckerberg, grilling like all the big tech CEOs basically. So I was talking about my thoughts on that, like it's like some of the points that were brought up by the senators really justifiable and things like that. And yeah, it spiraled in the conversation where he was trying to grill me to make sure that I am truly like I know what I'm talking about, and he really like asked like very like sophisticated and complicated, not complicated, but like specific questions. Yeah. Then after that, then we went into talking about some books I read, right? So he really wanted to see. It was mentioned that you shouldn't like regurgitate your application, right? So, but because like he was interested to know what I've done, so I still like at least kept it surface level. So I didn't try to go into as much detail as I did in my application, but I tried to show a lot of passion in that to show that I'm very enthusiastic, and I plan to continue this kind of thing. So that's what I tried to show when he asked me to talk about projects. He was asking me about my gap year. He was really he was grilling me on my gap year. So he was trying to see like, oh, is this guy like just trying to waste time, that kind of thing. Like he really like even like the jobs like that I'm applying to. He's like, oh, what job? Like, are you sure you're gonna get it? Or like that kind of thing. So yeah. So maybe my interview experience is a little bit more unconventional. I'm not sure, but yeah. yeah, anyways, after that I got to ask him a lot of questions, so I asked him about Yale, asked him a lot of questions about school, and then it ended with just 1 hour of him giving me career advice. So that was after the interview. So I told him like, oh, eventually I might want to like go become like Minister of Digital, and then like he was like, are you sure? like, are you sure you want to? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. So just that. Anyways, yeah. So I thanked him again afterwards and sent him more tech recommendations that he asked for.
Woo! Round of applause for Wei Lun. Thank you so much for that. Well, at least your interviewer didn't reel you and ask you, are you a member of the Chinese Communist Party? Okay. Did that happen? Okay. Now, we move on to Nick right there. So, you mentioned earlier that you had the 0 right there. So like, that is like a while ago, but what do you remember about your alumni interview?
So I think maybe something to say is that not every school does interviews. There are some who do, some who don't. And so I got a Yale interview, but I didn't get into Yale. So maybe because my interview wasn't as good as yours. Look, I want to be very careful about some of the things I'm saying because I don't want to necessarily overgeneralize to, what we do and what everybody else does. I tend to get a bit when I see people who speak too confidently about something that they can't possibly have enough experience on. So maybe I'll share a little bit. So I interviewed in 2005, that's so long ago, doesn't it? But I think one thing that we try to do, and I understand this for those of you who will go to interviews, and I'm sure Wei Lun, maybe you felt the same way, because if these are universities that you've dreamt about your whole life, or at least in the last 2 or 3 years or whatever it is, you will tend to be very nervous before going for these interviews. This will be true for any meaningful interview that you have to do. So I think the first thing that Nadia and I try to do is actually, so we do it in a casual place. You did at McDonald's, we've done it in coffee shops or whatever. So we normally don't do McDonald's just because it's a bit noisy, but like, otherwise we try to, again, a casual setting, which I think is good. And the first thing we try to do is actually say like, we know you're very nervous, it's okay. We are really trying to get to know you, and it's really best if you feel comfortable while you do this. So I think first is, if you go for an interview, the interviewers are not there to try and eat you alive. What we are really trying to do is be able to draw stuff that we can write onto the report in a way that shows you in the best light. And it's easy to say, don't get nervous, okay, all that, but so I'd rather just say like, we understand you're nervous, so if at times you feel like, okay, I need to think about this a little bit more, it's okay. Again, because we don't have a particular type we're looking for where we're like, oh, everybody must be able to think on their feet, like who cares? Right? Some people need a bit more time, some people need, it's okay. Just say, hey, okay, this is a great question, or whatever, can I think about it a bit more? So you mentioned about like the tech, the sort of congressional hearings that are going on. If we ask that and you need a bit of time, then you need a bit of time. It's okay, it's really not that big a deal. Again, because we're trying to draw everything out from what we can. So my experience back 2005 was very suit and tie. So the interviewer was the late Dr. Goh Cheng Teck, and he did it in the Macy offices, wearing suit and tie. And while he was still in charge, it was very terrifying for the applicant. Because a few years later, when I joined the panel, it was like 4 guys in the suit and tie interviewing some poor kid across the table. So when Nadia and I did it, when Dr. Goh retired, Dr. and I did it, we were like, okay, we have to like casualize this thing. So that's what we tried to do. And again, because it is difficult when you're nervous and then you're sitting across a boardroom table from people in suits. So hopefully we can change some of those things. So I guess the thing here is we know that it's nerve-wracking for you. We therefore understand if you need a bit of time here and there together, it's fine.
Thank you so much for that. Wow. If you think about, the modern day college applications process, and this is actually a point that I want to echo, right? You guys will probably feel stressed at some point throughout this process. I want to encourage you that many people out there are on your side, so don't feel that it's the be-all and all along the way. But to kind of think about productive ways in which we can prepare for this process, right? So I want to kind of draw on your experiences, Wei Lun and Nick. So how do you feel that people should prepare for this conversation that they're going to have? Not with a fate determiner, but certainly with, a member of the university community that you may or may not join at some later point.
Okay. Okay, so personally for me, for the interviews, I watch a lot of these videos. So they are like college-specific sharings, like my interview with like Princeton, my interview with this, and even like what an admission officer looks for in. So there's actually a bunch of these kind of videos on YouTube, and I find that different schools kind of have like a bit of a set agenda. I'm not sure about Harvard, but like for my interview, my guy, Dr. Chong, he really wants to. Sorry, the Gen Z slang. Right, he really he was very keen on finding out whether I was a good roommate. So like he kept asking about like my trips and all that. He was like, okay, so like if I had told him like, oh actually right, I snore damn loud, all my friends ran out of the room. So like I guess it's like the same with our Princeton interview. So I went for an interview at Princeton alum also, and I thought it went very well. Because I was just like talking about the things I've done, being very enthusiastic about it. But I guess like I couldn't reciprocate like the type of I'm not sure like sophisticated conversation he was trying to have in a particular area. For me, like literally, I think of the potential questions that they could ask. Especially like after you watch these videos, then you have a very good idea of like typically what kind of questions they ask. Then just like at least have some answers to them, at least like point form. But don't memorize anything because I think they can tell, right? So just like make sure that you're very natural.
Yeah, we can definitely tell. So I just want to say, I think it's good to watch these videos, but be careful of survivor bias, right? Because usually the ones who get in, you'll think that they got in for this reason, that reason, but the reality is we don't know. And there are many people who maybe did the same thing but didn't get in. So I think you watch these videos as a guide, but don't take them as like an all-be-all. So I think they're very helpful. Maybe as an interviewer, I would say just prepare kind of like 6 things. Because there are many things you can't control. The course of the conversation will, in a way, for Nadia and I, we'll take it wherever we think the student wants it to go, so the applicant wants it to go as well. So if you are big on, I don't know, let's say the congressional hearings or that, then we will go in that direction. If you decide that you want to talk about your extracurricular and community service or whatever, we will go that way also. But so here's the advice I would give to you in preparing for this thing, right? And by the way, this is true for any interview you will go to, regardless whether it's alumni interview, job interview, marriage interview, whatever it will be. Okay? You got a marriage interview, maybe less so. But job interviews also, when you apply for internships and jobs, right? So advice number 1, so it's 6 things, but it's really like 3 and 3. Think of the 3 things that you will kill yourself, or not kill yourself, you will feel really badly if you leave the interview without telling the person. So make sure that whatever it is, you tell these 3 things. Don't care whether it comes in the flow. At some point, figure out a way to bring it up, or at the end, just say, hey, I also want to talk about this. Because if it's such an important part of you and your application, all that, make sure the interviewer knows it before you leave the room. Otherwise, you'll regret like, oh crap, I should have said this. You don't ever want to do that, right? So this is true for any interview. The second thing is have 3 good questions that you can ask the interviewer at any point. And naturally, this one you can find online. People will tell you, oh, don't look for things you can Google or stuff like that. Usually, it's very personal to hold that kind of stuff. What advice would you give? Whatever it is, but have 3 good questions. But most importantly, is the first part, right? Don't leave the interview feeling like you should have said this 1 or 2 things. So the night before, 2 days before, just prepare in your head, right? Like 3 things I really want the interviewer to know. And by the way, like I said, this is true for alumni interview, job interview, and so on. These are the 3 things I really need them to know, and make sure you get those 3 things out. Because that's in your control. Everything else, the kind of questions we ask you, right? So even books, right? What kind of books do you read? It's not like you can control that. I could also ask you what media do you consume, or like what are the tabs currently open on your Chrome browser or whatever it is. I mean, you can't control that, right? So you be honest, but there are things you want us to tell that maybe we don't tell. And Nadia and I usually, before the interview ends, we'll always ask, is there something that you want to tell us that we haven't covered yet? So we try to do that, but maybe some interviewers don't. So you just want to make sure that you have 3, 4 messages, 4, whatever it is, that you must get out and get them out.
So in terms of preparation, I actually have something else to add. 2 more things actually. So one was that I actually, because there's no policy on applicants not being able to do background checks on the interviewer, so I just went to search his name, right? So then I found that okay, this guy is a econs professor, right? So he does econs. But of course, that's all I decided to find out lah. Right. So after that, because I have many different interests, right? Many different things I can talk about. I can talk about things that are more technical, right? Or I can go into the more political, the more like economic side of things. So which is why like that looking at this guy's background allowed me to choose what to focus on. So I rewatched like some of the things that I was interested to talk about, like the congressional. I rewatched the thing, so that I made sure that I had it fresh in my mind. If we were to go and discuss about that. So that's why the conversation about that went very well. The second one is about the questions. So as mentioned earlier, usually at the end of the interviews, they'll ask you, if you have any questions first. Asking about the school and showing genuine interest in the school is quite important. Like at least one of the questions can be that. And so like I watched a lot of videos on like the Yale campus, the Yale like life at Yale and things like that, so that I can come with like very specific questions to get them to elaborate with their own personal anecdote.
If you want to differentiate a little bit actually on that point, you can talk about professors as well. That's another easy one. Because if you say stuff like, oh, you have a residential system, but like many schools have that, but specific professors in the fields you're interested in is unique to Hodel, the school herself, right? So you can't split. So you can use professors is another good way, I think, of saying, oh, why do you want to go here?
Perfect. Thank you both for sharing. Now, I want to draw on your experiences right now as we think about, well, how to do well, how to do maybe not so well, how to do disastrously badly, amongst other things right there. So, when at the point of the interview, do you feel, Nick, that the conversation is typically going well? What needs to happen for you to feel subjectively as an interviewer, this is a person that I could actually recommend for admission to Harvard University?
So maybe I have a slightly different view of that. I don't think, at least in my view, I think Nadia feels the same way, but I can't also speak on behalf of her. I don't think we've ever had an interview ever in all our years doing this where we felt, oh my god, that went terrible. And I think it's in part because whoever we interview has been amazing, but also I think the onus on it being a good interview should be more on the interviewers than the interviewees. And what I mean by this is we need to make you feel comfortable to tell us stuff, right? Because we understand you're nervous, you're young and everything. I've heard some cases where there are some interviewers who go around bullying, what is the point of all that? The poor person is like 19 years old, 18 years old, terrified, and then you want to show off, why? So I don't know if I can say that things are going poorly or that kind of thing. But what typically goes well is when we manage to have a good, more comfortable kind of setting, then it becomes like a back and forth where we exchange ideas. It's okay to ask questions. So for example, because you brought up the congressional hearings, right? So let's say you're having a conversation with the interviewer. I think it's totally fine for you to say, hey, but what do you think about it? Because again, the more conversational you can get, the more comfortable everybody feels. And whether or not that leads to a good recommendation or not, that's harder to say. But I don't think we've ever had a bad interview because they've always felt conversational, and I think that really, really helps.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. When you think about, certain traits, right, in some of the interviewees that you've encountered so far, what would you consider to be some of the traits demonstrated by some of the more, I'm intentionally avoiding the word, successful, but people who left a memory?
People leave memories for all kinds of reasons. I don't want to generalize because the way we approach every interview, like I say, is a blank sheet, right? So we don't go into this thinking, oh, we need this person to be like A, like B, like C, that kind of thing. We've met so many diverse candidates, and I've been very enlightened after that, and actually encouraged by how great young Malaysians, and non-Malaysians also, because we also interview foreign students are. And I don't know if I can say this is a certain trait, but the thing that probably unites many of them still, and I don't think is unique to the interview, whether they're successful or not, because they probably are, or they are already, it's like a strong desire and passion for whatever field they're interested in. But you guys already knew that, right? So I don't know if I'm evaluating on this point. But that always comes out, and find a way to get it to come out, because that to me is like a base for all of that. So I don't think we can draw anything else out because they're all quite different. And we really appreciate all those differences when we interview them.
Wonderful, thank you for that. And in concluding, before we open up for questions, I have a question then for Wei Lun. Wei Lun, would you want to volunteer to be a Yale alumni interviewer, and what would you ask your interviewee about?
Well, that's a very sudden tough question. Okay. I mean, if it was me, I would really want to challenge how sophisticated their thinking is, whether they actually think critically when they form their opinions. So I'll keep asking probably about why. Why do you think that? Why do you think that? If after just one or two whys they can't explain themselves anymore, then it might be a bad sign. So that's why I'll say if you guys want to talk about an international topic with your interviewer, do keep asking yourself, okay, why do I have this opinion? Okay, why? And if you realize that even if just after one or two whys you don't have any more things to support your opinion, then you know something is off. So you need to look more into it. Yeah.
We've never really had that problem, to be honest, because again, it comes down to what the person is passionate about. And if there's something they've really committed to and be passionate about, then actually generally they'll be able to talk about it for hours. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, as long as you're able to, again, these three things I want to talk about, make sure you can really talk about them, generally you'll be okay.
Wonderful. Thank you all for this wonderful session, and round of applause for our panelists, please. Thank you. Amazing. All right, now I believe that we have some time for questions, yes? So so let's go ahead and take some questions from the floor. And anybody wanna give us a first question? So scan the QR code for Slido.
Yep. One.
This question is directed towards Nick. So my question is, what is the most memorable interview that you've ever had?
When you've been doing this for 11 and 12 years, they all kind of fade into each other. But the one interview where maybe it was the most memorable was because this guy wanted to demonstrate that he could sing a song not in his native language, and we were like, no, it's fine, but he insisted still do it. Well, he got it anyway, so I'm not saying that you can't do that, but it's memorable only because he did something like that, which is quite different. But it's not like we say, oh, he's in because of that, or he didn't get it because of that. He got it anyway, on the back of everything he achieved. He just decided to do that, which made it memorable. By the way, I give a lot of credit to that guy because he did it when we had that whole 3 or 4 suits across the table. So well done to the person.
Just like you mentioned about the congressional hearing thing, right? So I am a little bit interested in politics, I would say. Would you say that having political knowledge about things that you're interested in, say for example like in tech, is it an advantage, and should you be preparing for these kinds of things if you are going for an alumni interview?
Well, if it's the thing you're going to bring up, like they say hey, so maybe they'll ask you what is the current issue that you're particularly passionate about at the moment or whatever it is, then you better be ready to talk about it, whatever it is. I don't want to say it's an advantage because it could be something you're passionate about, but the person next to you could be very interested in something else, and I don't see it as advantageous to know a particular stream of topic versus another. I see it as advantageous if you're able to talk about it eloquently, in a sophisticated way, but it's not as if this one thing makes you better than this other thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily politics, but just one thing to note though is that, especially if you are going to go to a very technical field, and you want to talk about technical topics, it might be harder because I think a lot of times, in fact, all the interviewers that I've gotten aren't technical people at all. So I definitely the non-technical exploration that I've done in the past has really helped me. Right. So hope that's.
And also, I think another point of that, right? Because under the American system, you don't have to declare your major until after your first year, or sometimes even after your second year. So we don't actually expect everybody to be like, oh, what do you want to major? You don't always have to know right away.
A question from Slido. This is for Nick. What is your favorite question to ask applicants during an interview?
I don't know if I can say that, just in case I interview some of you next time. So, okay, I will say this. I like the kind of questions that people can't prepare for. Because, again, right, the worry is that somebody memorizes stuff or whatever. Because, again, I want you to be natural. I want to know who you are. And if you memorize stuff, it defeats the purpose of it. So, you know, we always ask tell us about yourself. I mean, everybody does that, but it's not as if I have a set question. You know, actually, Nadia and I almost never ask, why do you want to go to Harvard? We almost never ask that kind of stuff. Because we know it's almost going to be rehearsed. So we are actually looking to ask questions that people can't prepare for. We do ask like 2 or 3, but I can't say what they are. If you ask Victor, I think if Victor's around, about maybe random questions that we asked him, maybe he can tell you, but I don't think I should.
Wow, wonderful. Any more questions right here?
At the back.
At the back? Ah, yes, right there.
Okay. So actually, like, if the candidates, like, before going to the interview, do they know who are their interviewer? And also, like, for the interviewers, actually they are in specific field. For example, like, I'm interested in like psychology, and then the interviewer are in psychology, or like just random.
I can't speak on every school, but at least the way we do it for the Harvard interviews, Nadia and I interview everyone regardless of their major. And the only way, as far as I know, for the applicants know the interviewer is when we reach out to say, hey, we would like to schedule an interview with you. So that's, I don't think you get notified by the admissions office, we notify. But I don't know how it works for other schools.
Yeah, for mine, all of the 3 interviewers that are all random, like from random fields. Yeah.
A question from SlideSchool is, does the interview really make or break your application? Like, how big of a role does it play?
The same way that your essays play, I would say.
Alright, I think we have one to Wei Lun. What do you think of your gap year, and was it worth it? How was your experience?
Wow. Okay. So.
Some interviewer.
Okay. So I mean. Okay. Before I talk about my gap year, just some interesting notes. In my additional information, I also talk about what I'm going to do in my gap year. Okay, so I listed them very clearly. And then once I've achieved some of the things that I wanted to do, like first of all, I managed to secure a full-time job. I sent a letter to the office telling them that, oh, I managed to accomplish this, oh, my NGO is set up now, like we have how many members now, what have we done? So I gave them an update. So, okay, anyways, but I think if you guys have a gap year, maybe consider doing that as well. I think that really helps. Probably, I don't know. But like, and it's what I've done in my gap year, and what was it, like, how do I think? Okay, right now, was it? Something like that. I approached my applications a little bit differently. So after A levels, I finished A levels in June. Then I held prom. Then after that, I did like a tuition business thing where I connected like students with other students. Like so, like it's like students teaching students. But that was just like a side thing for a while. Went on a lot of trips. So I think it's quite important to share, you know, how I like to travel and control my friends and all that. So instead of just being like a very one-dimensional career, like what do you call it, like corporate, safe type of person. Yeah. Then. In December, I joined like some competitions, wrote an article, and then for the year after that, I applied to some jobs and some internships as well. But I got a job in a smaller company, and so worked for that. Then I managed to get like an internship in China. Went to China for an internship. And then doing those during these full-time endeavors, also was doing a non-profit. Shout out to Kids Malaysia. So. Things like that. I think it was quite eventful, but just make sure that your gap year is planned. Just make sure that your gap year is planned, especially when you want to apply for like jobs and all. Because like for example, the first round of job applications, maybe if you don't get, you know, any like thing desirable, and then you want to instead approach something different. Like maybe you want to apply for research, research opportunities instead, right? So yeah,
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, hi, I have a question directed to Nick. This is less about like preparation as an applicant, but more about yourself. And my question would be, you mentioned that you've been interviewing candidates since 2010, right? And it's been a long time now. So my question would be, what have you learned from the candidates, like from that experience? What brings you back year after year? I mean, you mentioned it's fulfilling to see Malaysian applicants being so great, but what else brings you back year after year? Yeah.
So for everybody else, that's the question you can ask your interviewer on the day. So it's a really good question, by the way. I think honestly, it's just like meeting really, really cool young people who are doing so many different things. Honestly, like all the different ones over the years have done so many different things. It's just really nice to see people who are involved in a lot of things that I didn't even know about, and to learn like how much of the world there is out there as well. So I guess like what keeps me coming, because it is honestly a bit of a chore to actually write up the reports and so on. Although now with ChatGPT it's not so bad. But the best part of all of this, and the reason why I think, and Nadia and I do every year, is just like the amazing people we meet and the opportunity to learn so many new things. Like really, I learned so many things about the world from them. We had one student who was really into like translating from native languages, like the songs of her native languages into like modern, like stuff like that is so cool, right? Like who does that at 18 years old, but they did that, and I think that's really cool. So I think it's really just meeting all these people. It's great.
Got one question over here.
Hi, so my question is it advisable for you to branch out during the interview and talk about interests that may not necessarily correspond or relate to your intended course and that the interviewer might not necessarily specialize in? So like for example, if my intended course is biomedical sciences and maybe I want to branch out and talk about something that's not directly linked to it, like gender studies, is that something that you would advise?
Yeah. No, if it's something you feel strongly about and you brought it up for a reason, then by all means. Because again, we will write everything we can write on the report. So if it's something that's important to you, then make sure that you bring it up.
Can I add on to that a little bit? I think that can be productive to the extent that maybe you're not going into stuff that's too arcane to the point that like the person isn't really able to follow. Because at the end of the day, a conversation is kind of like a dance, right, between yourself and the other person as well. So if you can go right ahead and advance your thinking, and the person can follow along, then it can be easier in some situations compared to others. But yeah, mostly it's true.
So to add to the point, even though earlier I mentioned that my interviewer wasn't a technical person, I still did talk about some technical things, but then like I made sure to break it down to such that like a non-technical person will be able to understand. So as long as like they could roughly understand what I'm talking about, and like like you know your stuff, right? I think maybe that gives a good impression.
Okay, cool. Hope that answers the question. I think we have only about 3 minutes left, is it? 3? 2 minutes, okay. 2 questions. Alright, last 2 questions. Anyone out there?
Or I can give some like last minute 4 things tips.
Sure,
Okay.
by all means.
Number 1, okay, so just 4 things, just from years of interviewing, besides the stuff I've said. Number 1, when you go in, just don't be an asshole. Easy. Like really, that's probably the number 1 off-putting thing. And these are more in job interviews, I say. I've not met anybody who's been a jerk during the Harvard interviews. Number 2, after the interview, if they contacted you via email or WhatsApp, just send a thank you note. It's just considerate. And this one is true for job interviews as well. Just do that. Number 3, earlier on extracurriculars, right? So at least for Harvard, and I assume this will be same for many of the schools. If you're, because there may be some of you here who are worried that you don't have enough extracurriculars or whatever it might be. Things like actually the stuff that you do at home, because if you come, let's say, from a family that wasn't able to afford you the time to go out and go to clubs, like to join some clubs or to join some activities or go for whatever it might be, having to take care of your siblings as you grew up is also an extracurricular activity in Harvard Science, right? So don't just be limited to the official clubs you get at school or official organizations or whatever. Think also about talking about some of these parts of your life, which may not at the surface seem like extracurricular activities, but actually are. We've met people, for example, who they couldn't do a lot of extracurricular activities in school, secondary school, because they had to help their parent work in the hawker center. Well, stuff like that is also an extracurricular activity, even if it's not like a school thing, right? And then the 4th thing, just to recap, because I think it's probably the most important point I could give you, is like the 3 things that you want to tell, just make sure you have that and make sure you really get it out. This is true for any interview you go through. Oh, and number 5, if you're looking for internships or jobs when you come back, I will be hiring, so thank you.
Wonderful. Anything to add on, William? Alright, cool. So, incidentally, if you want to see a bit of a flip of the script and you want to see me interview them, that's on YouTube, search for Victor Tan, and you'll find what you need to find. All right, cool. Thank you.
Let's give them a round of applause, guys. We have the panel speakers and also the moderators to stand and take a picture. On check.
Hello. Thank you, Nick, Wei Lun, and our amazing moderator, Victor, for that very engaging session. I feel like I'm more than ready to go for an interview now, right, Kai?
Yep, alright, me too, man. Those were some hot tips. Nia, are you hungry now?
Oh, thought you would never ask. So, before we head out for lunch and come back before 2 p.m., we wanted to